Okay, so this is an interactive work. That let me just do an introduction for people who were not there last year and don't know where this way of geometrical thinking comes from. So, okay, this way of setting a possible harmonic system of things, beings, ideas, nations in this case, comes from around 40 years of group study and experimentation of the Pythagorean laws of harmonics applied to the teaching of the seven rays. Since the 80s of last century, attempts have been made as forerunners by a group and then groups of hearts and minds oriented to embody as I said, the 13749 model of space and hierarchy through a subjective group working using the as if golden rule below and above, following the celestial rhythms and cycles of the solar plan. I want also to show you the website just to show that is okay, here we are. So also the website, the Planetary System, is a structure. Let's see if I can, okay, a bit bigger. It's structure following this model. And so it's online since 2012 and is a website in 3 languages up to now. And also this idea, manifested idea, stems from this progressive attempt to embody the hierarchical septenary model in order to create a living, magnetic and conscious entity and thought form. So you can see there are always 7: purpose, field, plan, model, manifestation, community, order. And also the signs of the heavens are our calendar to post things. So let's go back to the, okay. Okay, in the first cycle of 49 years of this systemic group attempt, starting from 1987, the TPS project was conceived to express the 5th septennium work dedicated to manifestation, this one, from 2015 to 2021. And namely as a window open to the world in order to saturate space and human mentality with the sowing of ideas, formulas, and forms for a new culture and civilization in alignment and resonance, as I said, with the celestial rhythms and cycles of the solar plan. Behind or inside the current international group, which gives life and energy to it, called itself pop, or a prototype for a planetary order, for a new pop music. And you can find better on the website, there is this text in the documents page called Asserting the Planetary Plan. There you can find everything of the project, of the goal and so on, of the inner sense of this structure action. So, and let's go back to the 16. Let me see if I can see. Okay. Okay. So here we are. Okay. So these 49 centers of fires of Brahma, we have to activate it as a prototype for our future. And it has to be activated before by some resonance of us, or the new group of observers. And hopefully someday, maybe in the third decade of Aquarius, by the United Human Group, or we will see the manifestation at that time of it. And so you see, there are 49 functions, and they are identified by, we can say also by the mottos of the nations in this case, or by some ideal formulas. Then human hearts and minds are the antakarana to precipitate into the three words. Okay, so what we are going to do in this workshop is to investigate the basis and guidelines for a group work, which will focus on this harmonic system of nations in an attempt to identify the right place or function of the nations whose rays are not indicated by the Tibetan master. This requires hierarchical skills and knowledge, of course, but the new group of world servers, the Planetary Ajna Center, can use and expand its vision capacity, availing itself of the system of perspectives which only harmonic group can offer. Okay, let's go back. Here are the three options we presented before. Then we can go back to these 5 inlets. Okay. Okay. Let me see, go to the 32. Okay. Yeah, just an interesting hint. I can probably put it bigger. I could, but if you need, I can put it bigger and you tell me by raising your hand. You see this where I point my mouse. So this system of perspectives is a way of thinking that by this H.T. Lorenzi, a 5th, 7th ray Swedish disciple of last century, he fixed as the closest way of thinking, the closest to the causal or soul knowledge. So it would be the system thinking, the cherry on the cake, the best that the mental unit can produce. And so on the 4th subplane or the 5th monastic plane. And so this way to put perspective into a harmonic system, it's like to look at the possibility of the organization, harmonic organization that follow the law of analogy and correspondence. So thus this organized according to the law of analogy and correspondence, thus embodying through the Antakarana, the rainbow bridge, the psychogeometrical law of the golden section, the law of Venus, our solar angel. So we have the harmonic laws, which are the 7 intervals. It's more like ideas go into form. The golden section is subtler. So it's like till the mental unit, we could use these harmonic relationships, which are integer numbers, I think in English you say. They are not transcendent numbers like the golden section. So it's like the harmonic system of perspectives is how to think at our best as humans. But the golden section, which is the capacity of the mind, the lower mind with the higher mind, to compare things through the law of analogy and correspondence, builds this antakarana between the kama manas and the higher manas. And so it's like this lambdoma is a wonderful tool for this Venus, this solar angel in us, to build the antakarana for a right thinking, for a right precipitation of any idea into its main 7 centers and the 42 lower centers. So glory to Venus, that in these days is so wonderful in the sky. And okay. And okay, here is our soul word. Okay, again, some quotation quotes. The Lord of the world, the Ancient of Days, is releasing new energies into humanity, transmuting in the present furnace of pain and fiery agony. This transmutation will bring about a new power of sacrifice, of inclusive surrender, a clearer vision of the whole, and a cooperative spirit hitherto unknown, and which will be the first expression of that great principle of sharing so sorely needed today. I'm not here speaking idealistically or mystically. I'm pointing out an immediate and possible goal. I'm giving a clue to a scientific process which is going on under our eyes and which is at this time at a point of crisis. So the system of perspectives is like to give a scientific tool to this principle of harmonic sharing. Okay. So if you have any suggestion about I put Canada and New Zealand as 2-7. If someone has made a meditation about other nations, please let's share. And we can consider also, meanwhile, maybe BL, you can help me to see if someone is writing something in the chat.
Yes, I'll keep track of that for you.
Thank you, and the hands, Amen. Yeah,
Right.
let's just look at the 7 main goals in the diagonal. So restoration of the mystery is clearly a first-rate goal. And we have in the what we can call the first cross, which is the row, the first row and the first column. It's also called a cross, an intersection of horizontal and vertical. We have China, India, Great Britain, Germany. So the nations that have this first ray in their set, particularly the sole nation of China and India, which doesn't mean that in the current manifestation we can see this in action, but in their potentiality they will take care particularly of this first goal, as well return of the Christ, Great Britain, USA, Canada, New Zealand, and Brazil. And group initiation, we could put also other name for these goals. Also, the plan is the title of all the 49 goals, but could be on a higher octave also here, the 3-3, if we put the purpose on the 1-1, the field on the second, as it is on the first column. So this is an attempt to translate what humanity has to face in the next, it was proposed in the next 700 years, or maybe much later. But imitation of the hierarchy, we have for Frey, Austria and Japan, but also Italy in personality. New culture, new civilization, we have just France. New world religion, we have Spain and Russia, but also the restoration of the plan. Okay, and also the formula behind the nations could be also revelatory. For example, Great Britain, we have science of initiation, esotericism of space. So these are goals of the inner soul of the nations, if they were able to cooperate together to the plan, to the working out the plan as entity, because they are entity. And we said before, the disciples and aspirants are embodying the soul ray of the nation. So each of us embody a part of that. Me of Italy and so on. And Decay precise that nation is not the country. And I read another quote that clarifies this. Okay. Yeah, maybe I can go to the slide so you can also read. Oh, yes, we still. In Destiny of the Nation 63, he says, differentiate most carefully between countries and nations owing to the fact that today and increasingly in the future, they will not be synonymous. The British nation is, for instance, a great synthesis of people, as is the United States of America, and also in a lesser extent, both Brazil and the Argentine. So we can just start from this. I called BRICS nations because X, British Empire, Brexit, we don't insist on that. I would like to point out that in the British Empire, there are several major and distinctive sections which are themselves definitely governed by certain ruling signs. I would like to indicate the influences which control the British Empire through the medium of its component parts. They are an important factor in present events, owing to the major and powerful nature of the part Great Britain is playing in the present situation. And this is dictated in 1944. As you will have noted, Great Britain is ruled by Gemini and Taurus. And consequently, the principles of multiplicity and integration are simultaneously present. Duality, triplicity, England, Scotland, and Wales are, and also differentiation are the conditioning aspects of the empire. Under the major control of Gemini and Taurus, you have the following potencies active. So I just wrote the rulers of the signs. See that this number is not the ray numbers, but it's just the number of the sign, of the relevant sign of these nations, apart from India, first and fourth ray. Rays are not given. So Canada, we have just said that could be second and seventh ray, and also maybe New Zealand. Any idea about South Africa or Australia? Anyone has some idea? Because also Australia is seventh ray for sure, somewhat, and maybe it could be another 2-7. Considering also the fact, as I said, that the second ray is the major ray, sorry. Yeah, it says in esoteric astrology 5-7. If it is remembered that humanity is primarily governed by two rays, the second and the fourth, it will be found that those nations and countries whose governing rays are also the second and the fourth must and will play an important part in determining human destiny. And we know that. And also another important quote from Destiny of the Nation 102. The head center, which means the soul ray of the Occident, is beginning to react to second ray energy, and the Ajna center, personality ray, to fourth ray energy, And in this lies the hope of the race of man. So think about Brazil.
That's a rice water, you like it? Well,
Yeah, Philip?
oh, I'm unmuted.
Yeah, you are.
I was just going to say in my chat that British Commonwealth countries have always suspected that they're all second-rate souls coming from the mother country, Britain, Canada, New Zealand, Africa, with the exception of India, of course, and maybe South Africa, but I'm not sure on that. But I'd say New Zealand and Australia and Canada, good contenders for the second rate.
Yeah, it's curious that all these nations in that box, and the other box is from whom they can be occupied. And as we know, the third ray as a soul, there is not.
Yeah, exactly. Non-existent.
It's the only ray which is missing in the soul.
Well, yeah. It hasn't been given because, and so there might be a country that has a third ray soul, but because he hasn't given out all the rays for all the countries, so we don't know. But very curious mystery, that one.
Yeah. So do you have any other idea, Philip? Because you are one of the most study students of these things about other nations.
Sorry, I was just fiddling around with my mute button, and I just came into the room. Sorry, so I wasn't. I didn't hear the original question.
No, it doesn't matter. If you have ever thought about other nations' race, and I think that because you study much these things about politics and so on nations, so
one I did think about was with the Netherlands. I believe the rays are not given for that. We've got Aquarius as the soul, but given their history, their exploration, their extraordinary trading history in the last few centuries, I thought at one stage that they might be a third ray soul. But from memory, I don't think their soul ray has been given for the Netherlands. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, it's not.
No. So I think they're a good contender for the third ray, but that could also be explained by other factors. What's their personality ray, personality sign?
Or what?
The Netherlands is an Aquarian soul, and I can't remember the personality expression.
The sign you mean? Here it is.
Holland, Cancer. So Cancer is got the third ray coming through it, and quite often in explorers or individuals or nations chart where you see Cancer, there's an embracing of a greater whole. Like Alexander the Great, for instance, was a Cancer. And you can see there with Scandinavia, it's a Cancer personality, and there's a embrace which embraces 4 different nations. So that could explain it, but not necessarily.
Yeah.
It could,
Yeah, as always, we have that the rays and the signs and the rulers of the signs don't coincide. In some cases, yes, they do. For us, Italy, we have 6 ray soul, and Leo and Sun, Neptune is perfect.
Yeah.
And Sagittarius, there is the 4th ray, but in other cases, it's not possible.
And I think that was proved with all the Dina material. One of the first things everyone checked when we did get that information about the birth charts for Dina students in the unpublished material was to check the rays, their given rays against their birth charts, and for the most part, they don't coincide at all, which proves that you can't get the rays from the horoscope. The horoscope is simply an interface for the expression of the known rays.
Yeah. We have seen from our experience that sometimes in the chart there is a sort of magnet nucleus of planets, and usually there is correspondence with the soul and personality rays of the person, but it's all we have experienced that. Yeah.
And I think we had a conversation some time ago about Italy perhaps moving from the second ray soul, a sixth ray soul, to a second ray.
You said that, and
Yeah.
I think we are enough with the sixth ray, but why not? Because St. Francis for us is a sixth ray embodying Christic energy, so it's good with that.
It's funny though, you do hear a lot of people say that St. Francis was an incarnation of Kutumi, and he could indeed be from the same ashram, but there is a strong sixth ray there, obviously, too.
Of Master Jesus, I read.
Yeah. I've read several speculations, so people are picking up at least on the 246 line with those individuals and with those masters, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, do me a favor and go back to that slide of all the countries. Francis has started his own discussion group over here. He wants, and I want to unmute him, so just give me a minute. He wants to know what would be the ray implications of the far future shift to the southern hemisphere.
Wow. Can you repeat the question, please?
Well, sure. You know, DK talks about, for instance, Brazil, which is, isn't it 2-4? It's right? Yeah, it's 2-4.
4-2.
4-2. Thank you. Yeah. 4-2. Right. So Soul Ray, fourth Soul Ray, having that in common with Germany. Anyway, he talks about how that will be the, you know, the seed of a distant future time. I'm thinking 6 root rays seems like the likely. And also there's teaching somewhere, you know, the fact that the whole, as a result of the reversal, magnetic reversal of the poles, there'll be a whole shift culturally to the southern hemisphere. And I'm sure Philip done a lot of work with this idea. And I'm wondering, in terms of the countries in the southern hemisphere, will that, since they will obviously come into prominence, would that affect the rays that that they would be found on?
Yeah, and also HBP speaks about the fact that every 1,080,000 something years, the poles are interchangeable, and so the climate is really reversed from equator to the poles. So everything is really in movement, in motion.
But I think Francis, the fourth ray soul of Brazil, is going to take thousands of years to really unfold. Several precession cycles, I'd imagine, and they, you know, we've been given 25,000 years for when the Brazilian, for the first subrace of the sixth root race actually kicks off properly, even though it's being formed now. And of course, it's attracting all these other fourth ray nations. There are a lot of Italians that live in Brazil. There are a lot of Germans that live there. There are a lot of Japanese that live there, all fourth ray in their origins or personality or soul.
Yeah, TK gives a hint as to just how distant the time is that they'll come into prominence when he says something like what is now called Brazil. In that land now called Brazil, suggesting a really distant time.
He's talking about the incorporation of countries like Bolivia and Ecuador probably into the nation of Brazil, and maybe other South American countries, I suspect, when he says that.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
And this somehow, and that seems to be just one of the few places where he really expands on this whole idea of the shift to the south, right? I mean, can you think of any other examples where he, you know, he really talks about specific instances how the energy will shift to the south.
By Africa, for example.
Yeah.
In Australia,
Yeah.
both in the southern hemisphere, both representing the lower chakras, or not. Well, at least the base chakra, I think, off the coast of Australia somewhere, and the sacral chakra somewhere in the vicinity of Africa. So they will take a long time to be activated, millions of years, literally.
Yeah, it's said that.
Any chance that the chakras themselves would reverse as a result of that magnetic reversal, so that you would get like a head chakra in, New Zealand, Australia, and then coming up to where we would then become the root chakra, or, say Northern Europe, Sweden, or, could become just a possibility.
I guess there's DK does talk about the possibility of Washington and New York changing, as swapping roles eventually within that nation. So it is possible that the planetary centers could change, I guess. But for now, and for the foreseeable future of several thousand years, I would imagine that they're going to stay where they are. The main, the heart center, Geneva, London, the throat center, Darjeeling Ocean Center, and so forth. In fact, in my new rewritten Planetary Centers essay, I have Darjeeling as the head center now, Ajna Center for New York, and so forth. And I'm much more comfortable with that assignation of chakras to those cities.
That's what I think too. I have always felt that Darjeeling is a more likely candidate for the head center because of the fact that, in a sense, it's less developed if you've been there. Also, the fact of its proximity to the Himalayas suggests that.
Yeah. Even if, I just be stick with this indication. So it says that is the Ajna center and the four centers along the spine. So the Ajna is in any case in the head. So to me, the head center is probably not activated yet, as it's not in the average humanity. So it could really be the door for the head center, Darjeeling, and connected as it is, the Manas Ajna with the Buddhi at the center of the head. But in any case, is the door for the first ray. But as the case says, the Ajna and the four other centers, that's why I found this other option. I knew about your option, Philip, and other option. But to me, it works also this way. And Geneva Heart is, of course, and London Throat, when not New York Solar Plexus, it's also unifying. Anyway, the perspectives, again, perspectives are many possible, and we have to build a group or also subjectively to investigate this system of perspective, because it has to be a hierarchy also of the perspectives. So what is influencing the ray or the function or the cyclic ray that now these inlets are transmitting? Because again, as this is your picture, Philip, where did I put this one? Okay, this one. Again, they have London is cyclic ray first, as Tokyo and Darjeeling. So there are not the 5 rays that Decay says that they are now manifest. So there are many perspectives that are converging in the same entity or system of entities. So also the rays, the signs are not revelatory of a unique key of interpretation, as is astrology. You were saying, Philip?
Oh, just the cyclic ray. We don't know how the duration of those cycles. for instance, in World War II, the first ray was coming through London very strongly. But it's Esoteric Nation as the throat chakra, as the leading nation of the Anglo-Saxons branch race of the Teutonic sub-race of the fifth root race. I think it's definitely the throat center. But I'm always open to other arguments or discussions or dialogues around that. And likewise with Geneva, the heart. The only ones that have been uncertain for me in the past were Darjeeling, Tokyo, and New York. But New York really fits the ocean now, I think. And Tokyo taking the solar plexus, because New York was originally assigned the solar plexus, is to me fits much better with the 6-4 energies there, 6-ray soul. And but at one stage, of course, Tokyo during the war as well had the first ray coming through it. And even though we take by deduction that Japan is a 4th ray soul, he doesn't actually come out and say Japan is a 4th ray soul, but you can tell from the passage that he says that by deduction it is a 4th ray soul. But in another place, he makes a very strong argument for a first ray, that the leaders of Japan were responding to the first ray, but that may have just been the cyclic ray that he was talking about.
Yeah.
So
the
other thing, I was just going to say, the other thing is that the Orient is a 4th ray soul, and therefore Tokyo is the major city for the Far East. It stands to reason that it's got the 4th ray there as well.
Yeah.
4th ray soul or a 4th ray person. Excuse me, Japan is a 4th ray soul and Tokyo a 4th ray personality.
Yeah. And another interesting direction of investigation is this one. It should be remembered that each ray embodies an idea which can be sensed as an ideal. The rays in time produce the world pattern which molds all planetary forms and thus bears witness to the inner potency of the evolutionary processes. This pattern forming tendency is being recognized today by modern psychology in connection with the human being, and his emotional or thought patterns are being charted and studied. So it is with the nations and races also. And here we are. Every ray produces 3 major patterns which are imposed upon the form nature, whether it be that of a man, a nation, or a planet. These 3 patterns are the emotional pattern embodying the aspiration of a man, a nation, or a race. It is the sum total of the desired tendency at any one time. And this is a good direction to investigate the rays of nations expressed by their people. The mental pattern emerging later in time and governing the thought processes of a man, a nation, or a race. The emotional and mental patterns are the negative and positive aspects of the personality of a man, a nation, or a race. The soul pattern is the predisposing and spiritual goal, the impasse note or destiny which the spiritual principle succeeds eventually in imposing upon the personality of a man, a nation, or a race. This soul pattern eventually supersedes and obliterates the 2 earlier pattern producing processes. So I found this very revelatory, and I made just some associations. So emotional pattern, mental pattern associated to the personal ray of the nation. And maybe this emotional pattern is revealed by the moon sign, which of course we don't know for the occult charts of the nations. The mental part could be related to the sun sign, when the sun governs all the other planets, and of course the moon sign. And the soul pattern is related, of course, to the soul ray and the ascendant sign. So these are a triad that is useful to to investigate. You have, for example, here, as we said, Australia has this Virgo ruled esoterically by the moon, and Capricorn as personality ruler, ruled by, oh, I was wrong here, oh, by Saturn. So, okay. Personal, oh my God, I have to touch this, okay. Okay, so we could think, could Australia have also some third ray? For example, second ray soul, third ray personality, or whatever? You, Philip, are a sort of Australian guy. Tasmanian.
I'm trying to get unmuted here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm on there.
Yes.
Yeah, Australia is super third ray, I think. And maybe it's personality. And of course, we know the third ray expresses so strongly through Capricorn. But Australia is obsessed with the economy, and it's a very materialistic country, which you can explain by Capricorn as well.
Well, which one is not materialistic? Tell me.
Capricorn is the most materialistic sign of the zodiac and the most spiritual sign in many ways. So, yeah, definitely the third ray. I've had speculations of Australia being a second ray soul and the third ray personality. Yeah.
Could be. Okay. And so the third, okay, Saturn. Here, the second, we could see where in the Virgo transmitted the second ray then.
Yes, they say that Virgo is the strongest conduit at the moment for the expression of the second ray. And this has a parallel with other countries like Greece and Ireland, who have both got strong second ray, strong Virgo, I should say. But particularly Ireland, being the future school of the Christ, is a very interesting example.
Yeah. Okay, so Canada, they said seventh ray. How do can they be so sure? Do they know people who proposed seventh ray?
Oh, it's not seventh ray, Anto. It's seventh sign, Libra. They didn't give the rays for Canada.
Yes, but both Frida and Margot proposed the seventh ray.
Well, I'm not sure whether they've made the mistake that a lot of people make through misreading the text in the Bailey books. With that, it is a bit misleading with that second sign, seventh sign, and people have actually read that as the rays in the tabulation in the Bailey books. So, but I wouldn't know. I don't know Canada. I think the second ray is certainly, but I don't know about the seventh ray because I don't know Canada that well.
Yeah. Okay.
Frida is involved with finance, which is the one of the themes of the seventh ray. So, yeah.
Okay. So New Zealand, we thought that.
Antonella and Philip, I just wanted to say that they did add some justification in the chats earlier when they were proposing that Ray 7. Canada was found on law, order, and good government, peace, order, and good government. So there was more to it.
Okay, thank you.
When they were proposing that, I just wanted to bring that up.
Okay. Let's do an attempt together to get the rays of South Africa, which is very, very interesting and also harsh story. Could be an odd ray somewhere, for sure.
Yeah, it could be a really late developing first ray soul. You know, it will eventually come into a place of power in thousands of years' time, but there's a good argument for that. And of course, Aries is a good interface for the expression of the first ray. But I'm not even thinking Aries in this case. I'm thinking just the nature of some of the histories of Africa. the fourth ray, though, is very strong in Africa. It must be a conditioning ray at least the personality level. When you think of the music and art that's emerging from Africa now, it's going to be quite extraordinary, I think. It's already extraordinary.
Okay. Just put this.
But this is Africa as a whole I was talking about. So I wasn't specifically talking about South Africa, which is an interesting hybrid of Western civilization and the local inhabitants. Experiment which has been brought to great success, of course, by Mandela, who was probably a first-rate soul.
Yeah.
And they say often that people like great leaders or artists who emerge from the soul of the nation have the same soul ray.
We have a couple of hypotheticals in the chat. Francis says Canada third ray also connects it to French Canada. Oh, wait a minute. Where for South Africa? For South Africa, Regina says created by Dutch and the British. Yeah. Does it reflect any of those rays? Apartheid suggests fourth ray, maybe.
Personality or soul?
It not specified in there. Isn't it interesting? Leslie says that South Africa at the end of apartheid actually experimented with a shared presidency of Nelson Mandela and de Klerk, and sharing leadership, and then later the Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
Yeah, could be a fourth ray personality.
Yeah, it's possible.
Conflict, and also this strong apartheid thing.
And South Africa also as a seed for the rest of Africa in many ways. That merging of the gradual merging of all civilizations around the world. This is what's occurring. Many of the Middle Eastern countries now are living in Northern Europe. This is something that's never happened before in the history of the world. It's only been occurring for the last 40 years. So, in a similar way, South Africa you can see as a seed for the whole continent of Africa.
Yeah, also because it's the only country which is so, let me say, a European or a Western. It's so different from the other countries. Okay.
Let me see. We still have, getting back to Canada, French Canada was very strongly Catholic, and there is a lot of corruption relatively for Canada in the business and politics connection.
Well, everywhere.
Yeah, welcome to our world, right?
Catholicism is a third-ray personality and a first-ray soul, so there's a third-ray connection with Canada in that respect.
And then also a question, where do the Indigenous peoples fit in for Canada?
Well, if the Indigenous people are part of the fourth root race, they are...
Fourth ray,
yeah, and also it is a nation or, well, I don't know, but they didn't build a nation in the sense of a manifested big country. They had for sure this soul, but we know that in the fourth race, as in China and the other yellow race people, the mass consciousness is stronger than the individuality principle, and the nation has this individual principle in it. So I guess that, for example, the American Indians are, for sure, they have a strong entity behind them, and we could also infer some race, but I don't know now, because the country of America is neither European or natives of America. Now is a new thing, is the melting pot of this.
PK does discuss the fourth ray in USA's makeup, and that it was an old Atlantean center and so forth, and likewise that whole coast, that whole east coast of North of Canada and USA.
Okay.
And then there were a couple of other comments that were about bringing up a larger question: do we take into account colonial origins of a country? And another related one: all the African countries were or still are colonies of European countries, with their political and cultural as well as religious. So connection to the rays of the colonizing country.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, because each morning we are meditating in the Esoteric United Nations on a nation, and we read the story of these African countries, which is all the same. They are a unique struggle, and it's really like an adolescent being which is fighting to find their own individuality or a true personality. They are still fighting for that.
Yes. I think what Bill said about the ray connections between the colonialists and the local people, there's probably something in that. But in many ways, they were just out to exploit resources, and reparations have been made in the last few decades, which is encouraging to see. And many of those nations are coming into their independence and autonomy, but there's still so much conflict going on.
Because the local chief, they are not still ready to govern. Not that in Europe or in America is better, but it's a different way. They use evident suppression means to rule in Africa. And in our countries, they are not subtle, because they are so evident that they are a fake governments, but they use these technological or is a fraudulent solicitude. That's the formula for the Western governments. Anyway, okay, how much time do we have to?
You got about 20 minutes.
20 minutes, okay. Some other comments? Maybe.
We have a number of comments, and I apologize to those people who I've missed. Sharon says, acknowledging that the maps of Canada and the US as we know them are colonized maps. If we look at the map of the Indigenous peoples, the borders are different, and they cover the entire landmass of North America. Yeah,
in fact, inlets is ruling the Americas. New York is ruling the Americas as a living center, not the city as we read. So it's an entity, a double entity, the two Americas. It's not Canada and the United States. But the nations are again temporary manifestations of these collective units, which are like the organs of this organism. And the international relationships are so necessary now to be oriented towards harmony. But the story of the continents or the 5 inlets through which hierarchy and Shambhala orientates the destiny or the evolution of humanity are clear. There are 7 centers in the on Earth, and 5 are manifest. 2 will be manifest, and New York is ruling both parts of the 2 Americas.
And Central America, yeah. Can I just make a comment, Anto, about the colonialists?
Sure, it's...
I mean, colonialism has been clumsy and cruel and, you know, very painful for every country in the world, from the European nations and USA and all the rest. And yet that integration was supposed to happen. It's all about the growth of global consciousness, humanity as a whole. So even though there are still many sore points to do with Native people's rights in Canada and Australia and New Zealand and USA, basically the transition has been made, and this will resolve itself, particularly when the 4th ray cycle comes in after 2025, gradually and slowly, we're told, where many conflicts like this that still exist will resolve themselves far more easily under the impulse of the 4th ray.
Yeah.
So we can kind of, you know, leave behind a lot of this painful history and get on with the greater integration process.
Yeah.
We have some more comments and questions. Let me see. Jennifer says, many African countries seem to be in childhood, just separated from the parent, and working on the personality, and survival issues abound. And I think that gets back to what you were saying when you were talking about them being the adolescents. And then Maya asks, what would the ray influence of Lemuria be on the western side of the US and western coastal states?
Well, I think Lemuria as a 3rd race, I think, Philip, you are more acknowledged than me on that, but I wouldn't dare to have an answer for the Lemuria in the America differentiated from the other lands. But what do you think, Philip?
Well, I with the Lemurian continent kind of overlapping into the west coast of the USA, pretty much to the Rockies, and from the Rockies to the east coast, more the old Atlantean continent. I've always seen the 7th ray in California in particular as being very strong, and that's kind of fits in nicely with the fact that USA is an Aquarian soul and is an Aquarian leader going to the Aquarian age. Having that 7th ray association, look at all the technological innovation, for instance, in California, and just the energy there, the quality of the atmosphere is, I've always thought, strong 7th ray. So I'll associate Lemurian, the old part of California, which is Lemurian, with the 7th ray for sure.
Even if also the 6th ray is very strong with the Hollywood things.
Yeah.
Vision.
Well, you know, yeah. America is a 6th ray personality, and Los Angeles is the heart center, which has a reflexive relationship with the 6th ray.
Yeah.
And of course, the 2nd ray soul of the nation works through there eventually.
Yeah, and also California and how the Western, it's let me find it, the site for the preparatory and advanced school of 6th ray too.
Yeah.
Here it is.
Preparatory in the West and advanced school in California.
Yeah, advanced California. Yeah. So this is also an interesting map, because to put the occult schools of mysteries for the future initiates, or also for the past initiates in these lands, it really reveals something about the deep function of the souls of the disciples in those lands.
Yeah.
So this is so complex, this thing, but I think that in a group, this workshop was just to present the possibilities for direction of sharing, and also and a brain and heart storming. But of course, I think there is a section in hierarchy which study these things. And we need to imitate the model, and maybe sometimes we will have a central station to study the right organization, the right human relationship, also from the point of view of the international exchanges. And so these continents, like the basic metrics of the endocrine glands. Then we have this consciousness, which is in evolution, which is organized by the initiatory schools, which are both subjective but will be also objective. And we are also already a earlier manifestation of that in some way. And then we have these 5 inlets, which will be 7 inlets, which are like real planetary centers for the 4th human hierarchy, through which Shambhala and hierarchy rule us. So I imagine that focusing on this matter, these 3 perspectives, it's something that probably one of the seed group, maybe the last one, should focus, because it's really like the 7th ray organizing energy, which is trying to put harmony between things, between the organs, to build a safe and healthy organism, which is humanity as a whole. Other comments?
Yes. And again, I apologize if I miss any of them. Someone asked for your website, so I gave them the planetarysystem.org.
Yeah.
And let me see. Maya says, what would the ray, this gets back to what we were talking about a little while ago, what would the ray influence of Lemuria be on? Oh no, we did that one. There was a follow-up on that. Did Lemuria only have a mental ray developed enough to credit? You know, they were
Well, the sparkle of mind was instilled. Do you say instilled in English, or put?
I think DK gave 357 for Lemuria. The 5th ray obviously is going to be strong in individualization, with Venus and Mercury being so powerful in a triangle at that time.
But 357 in where? Soul, personality, and mental ray?
No, I think just rays, general rays that were present, I think. I could be wrong, but I'm sure the 5th ray was there. At least the 3rd ray.
Okay. Well, third root rays.
He does give all the root races and the rays associated with them. Somewhere, I just can't think where it is right now.
Yeah. Then the sparkle mind. Yeah.
And then there was a discussion on the Iroquois, who influenced the U.S., the U.S. founding fathers, and they actually were in the entire Great Lakes region, both north and south, so Canada and the U.S. And then Leslie brought up the book, Hiawatha and the Great Peace by Sarah Darian, and a book by Professor Howard Zinn, A People's History to the United States about the Native American. And Sharon says the Iroquois Confederacy, as they were known, comprised 5 nations: the Mohawk, Onondaga, the Oneida, the Cayuga, and the Seneca. And they're still, those nations are still there around the Great Lakes area. And I believe they're on both sides of the border still. So,
well, we could think that they are saturating space on a parallel line, considering why DK didn't mention this thing. Well, he mentioned many things, but maybe part of the 4th race. And there is also among the schools, DK says that some schools of the initiatory schools are taken care by the 4th Manu, not by the...
Yeah.
Yes, so there are so many interlapped realities in humanity and in Devic kingdoms that we don't know the function of these wonderful Indias of America and so on.
There's one thing I could just say there, Anto, about them, is I've always seen them as being custodians at a more Vedic kind of level, and in terms of the sacred energy of the land, and those lakes and so forth. And of course, there were some initiates amongst them, like Hiawatha and so forth, who had a great deal of the old Atlantean wisdom, and who interacted with the colonialists, some of the disciples and initiates of the colonists. So they certainly have a role to play, and still do, in fact, you know, with the particular pipeline protests in the USA, for instance, and that's been going on for a few years.
Yeah, it's a great point. Custodians of the sacred land, the sacredness of lands, of the countries, of the land.
Australian Aborigines played a similar role, and so do the Maoris and many other countries. Yeah,
and think about all the nations with the root Stan, Kyrgyzstan, Afghanistan, all those nations. Yeah, they probably build a unity like Scandinavia does, and who knows what race they could have. I will ask.
Sorry, go on.
No, and also, yeah, Cambodia, Vietnam, all these Philippines, and so on. So they are nations, and I think that at the United Nations of the future, there has to be a section to build this lambdoma, or a system of functions for each nation, in order to be more conscious of the real function for the planetary service.
Someone had a question before about, I think it was Regina, about the what is the Esoteric United Nations? I'm not sure where she got that from.
Yeah, it's a meditative group that was proposed by Makara and USR University, and there are many people who adhered, and there is a nation which is the soul of that nation is the focus of the meditation of this group. And I think that BL, you can put the link if you have, or
I did. And someone else did too. There, you can email Michael Stacy, or you can we have the Soul of Nations on Makara. There's a website that has the information on all of it. And I believe you guys, when you're doing your meditations, you're getting some of the information from the previous things that we have there on the Soul of Nations. But it's just an esoteric way to meditate on countries and, to bring forth the goodness that we have in the world, and the focus individually on one country at a day.
Yeah. And also the fact that if is the new group of world servers that has to vitalize the soul of the nations, it's good way to do that. And also this, our humble attempts to visualize an integrated system of nations based on their function to the planetary service is a way, an open way to nourish this reality that once will be. Probably, as I said, in the third decade of Aquarius, when Venus will rule, or maybe in the second decade of Mercury, we will have a sort of esoteric United Nations, or an order, United Nations order. Because what is lacking is really as our planets have a array and a function, and in the organism of the solar system, also the nations, also the individuals in a group, also the groups in a system of groups should know what is the not unique function, but what is the main contribution that they have better than others, have to give to the oneness, to the unity, to create the unity based on this principle of sharing on a harmonic model, following golden section and the harmonic. Yeah, Philip.
I was just going to say, regarding that last question, I thought it might have been something to do with the birth charts, because I have a couple of essays about the United Nations on my website, and we know the exoteric chart, which is a Scorpio sun with about 3 or 4 planets in Libra. But I worked out that there's an esoteric chart based on some passages from DK that falls in May, in Wesak, of a particular year, of that same year, in fact. And Michael, Stacey, and the others in that group may be interested in looking at that. So, yeah. And of course, with that Taurus, we have the 4th ray presence again. Of course, the power of Wesak, that is actually a more subjective chart for the United Nations, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you. And we're down to 2 minutes, but I just wanted to put in there, and I don't know the exact quote, but I do remember that DK said somewhere that the gift of the United States was us being that melting pot. And I want to say, as a resident, and I know many people feel this way, I know many people don't, but shame on them. I want to say that the Native Americans are a major part of that melting pot that we have become. They have persevered for thousands and thousands of years, and they still persist today.
Yeah.
I'm going to cry now, and I'm sorry for that, but those nations are still strong today, not in the way they were before, and not in the freedom that they had before, but they are still there. So there's very much a part of who we are.
And also it's like the feminine, positive, and masculine aspect of a nation, maybe. They are taking care of this
holiness. Good way to look at it.
And think also about the African, all the Africans taken to America it's really a melting pot.
Right, it is. It is definitely a melting pot, and all those cultures that they bring to us, all the food that they bring to us, you know, there's such a big richness in that. And
a lot of that has to do with cancer as well, being potent in the charts of the Esoteric USA chart, Washington, New York City, and of course the Statue of Liberty, bring me your poor, and all that is related to cancer, bringing in the whole family of humanity into one nation.
Yeah, through obstacles towards stars, because for me, which I'm relatively young and born in Italy, to think about the problems of between black and white people, for me it's like in another planet. Could be real. It's really something that I cannot understand. And also but we had that, and 75 years we had Hitler, and we had these things, and it seems millions of years ago, but it's just a recent story. So it's really something that is really accelerating in these last centuries. Something very big is happening towards the sixth race of it's finished.
we're out of time. We're out of time.
Okay. So this last quote: "The age of nations is past. The task before us now, if we would not perish, is to build the earth." Teilhard de Chardin. Thank you, Biel, and Philip, and Francis, and the others who contributed to this work.
Grazie.